Best ever listeners, welcome to the best real estate investing advice ever show. I'm Ash Patel, and I'm with today's guest, Kim Hopkins. Kim is joining us from Flagstaff, Arizona. She is a principal at Iron Peak Properties, and her portfolio consists of over 300,000 square feet of multi-tenant light industrial in multiple states. Kim is also an LP multifamily syndication investor. Kim, thank you for joining us, and how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Ash?
Wonderful. Kim, before we get started, can you tell the best ever listeners a little bit more about your background and what you're focused on now?
Sure. So background is not to go too far back, but we we weren't really interested in any other business products early on. Fashion ain't my passion, as I like to say, but I always knew I wanted to build a business. I actually got a PhD in mathematics at the beginning, and I'm very embarrassed to say that, by the way, because I know that Robert Kiyosaki would make fun of me, and he's one of my idols. So I'm a recovering academic many years ago. And then we left academia, me and my husband, soon after graduating, and we went into the real business world. I was actually in tax credits. I got a job as a project manager in tax credits and ended up building the business and running half the company, and then getting into sales. And in 2014, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and decided that I didn't want to have a job anymore. I wanted passive income and I wanted to build my own business. And so we developed a 5-year plan in 2014 that alternated buying properties and having kids. So 2 kids and 4 properties later, we retired from our day jobs at the end of 2018 on time and under budget. And that's where we are today. We own multi-tenant light industrial, a little over 300, about 340,000 square feet, like you mentioned. And we own it in Oregon, Washington, Utah, and Texas.
Amazing. Kim, why multi-tenant light industrial?
That's a great question. So multi-tenant, that's all the advantages of an apartment multifamily investment, because if you have a single tenant property and you use leverage, in other words, a loan, which we do, if you have a single tenant property and that tenant vacates, now you're underwater on your mortgage. So multi-tenant affords us the risk diversification of multiple tenants. Sometimes, if one of our tenants leaves, we might not even know because they're backfilled a month later. It's faster to fill the smaller tenants and it's less of a risk to your mortgage. And then the reason for the multi-tenant industrial is because we don't get phone calls in the middle of the night to fix a toilet, which we like. Our tenants are businesses and they're very self-sufficient businesses, so they'll often fix things by themselves. And unlike office and retail, there's very little tenant improvement. So I don't need to do a lot of improvement to the space. I don't get a lot of phone calls on the space, and it's a very versatile space. We have CrossFit tenants, we have painters, contractors, all different types of businesses. So it's pretty good for recessions and things like, unexpected pandemics.
Kim, when you say multi-tenant light industrial, is that also flex space?
That could be considered flex space as well. Yeah, we look for properties with very small office build out, only about 20% of the space. And some of our spaces have a little more office. So yes, that could be considered flex.
And typical ceiling height in your properties would be?
About 12 to 14 foot clear height. Some of them are as high as 18.
Okay. And these are ideal for tenants, like you mentioned. I've seen churches in some of them.
Yes.
People that tint car windows.
Yes.
Wrap cars. Yeah.
Yep.
It's
We have all that.
It's such a versatile space. And one of the things I love about that is we've literally given people what looks like a dirty garage. And the next time you see it, it's an incredible space that they transformed on their own dime. Have you probably had a lot of experience with that?
Yes, that's very true. Some of the tenants just keep it very simple and there's very minimal build out. But then we have larger tenants like 10,000 square foot tenants, and they will do the build out themselves, which we love because we are not developers. We took a course in development and realized we would lose our shirts. So we don't do development. And then we'll give them some sort of rent abatement or amortization of the TI over the life of the lease. But we love when the tenants improve the space for us, which is another benefit.
Do you typically have to give them a tenant improvement allowance, or do they just do it on their own?
It really varies. We tend to encourage them to do it on their own.
So you don't have to pay for it.
So we don't have to pay for it, and we'll just give you free rent, and we'll just call that a day. And now we have a beautiful space that's improved for the next tenant, and we didn't have to pay for it. So that's our preference, but we're flexible too. We sometimes give them we sometimes pay for it as well.
Kim, I'm going to guess you didn't set out to get into this space. Did it happen by accident?
Yes, it did happen by accident. We kind of knew we didn't want to do multifamily because it's so competitive, and now the cap rates are so compressed, but we wanted something similar to that product type. And we knew a real estate agent in Vancouver, Washington, where we started, and he had a property like this available in 2014 when we started. And at first we said, absolutely not. These are way too many tenants. We don't want to babysit. And he slowly talked us into it. We kind of lucked out with the timing. The owner was older, in his 70s, and he was getting overwhelmed with the amount of tenants. And also he was still recovering from 2008. So a lot of the leases, there was some vacancy, almost 30%. And so we got it in contract with this high vacancy, but we really pushed the property manager and told him we would use him when we closed. And he actually filled most of the spaces by the time we closed. So it was a really good way to start off our investing career.
And you got hooked on this asset class.
I got very hooked on this asset class. Yes.
Are a lot of your rents triple net, or are they gross leases?
That's a great question. So sometimes the bigger tenants, we have a couple single tenant properties that are like 10,000 square feet, and those are triple net. They understand the concept of triple net, and it's very simple. For the multi-tenant industrial, we actually find that gross leases are much better for those kinds of tenants, because number one, it's easier for everyone to understand. No matter how many times you explain triple net to a tenant, at the end of the year, if you ask them to pay an extra amount in expenses because you have an overage, they're always upset, and probably rarely grateful if you pay them $200 instead. And so we actually bought in 2019 a multi-tenant property from a very large syndicator, one of the largest syndicators in Australia. And one of his selling points was he had converted all of the tenants to triple net. When we talked to the tenants on site, guess what their number one complaint was?
The variable cost.
Yes, they were very upset by that. So we promised them we'd do the exact opposite, and we converted them all back to gross. And now everyone's happy and everyone's lives are simpler.
Yeah. And just so the best ever listeners know, triple net typically would have the tenants paying for taxes, maintenance, insurance, things like parking lot resealing, exterior maintenance, roof replacements. They would all share in that cost. And when you have mom and pop tenants, they can't really absorb a variable cost. They budget. My rent is $1,500 a month. And if they get hit with $1,000 bill, that's really hard on them.
Yeah, and just to add on to that a little bit, you can add certain items back in as a variable cost, sometimes called modified gross. So for example, in Texas, where they have very high property taxes, which you can fight, by the way, but they have very high property tax reassessments, we sometimes have a modified gross lease that says you don't owe anything extra unless the property tax shoots up, in which case we might pass your pro rata share on to you.
And you don't have any of these properties in Arizona, do you?
That's a funny story. So we actually tried to find a property in Phoenix, Arizona last year, and we were in contract, but that clear height you asked about earlier was misstated. They told us it was a 14-foot clear, and we went and interviewed the top leasing broker in town, which is what we always do for our properties. And he said, hey, that's my least favorite property in this market. And we said, why? And he said, the clear height, it's only 12 feet. And we said, no, it's not, it's 14. And we went back and measured, and he was right. So we had to pull out of that property along with some other issues with what was stated in the offering memorandum. But the other issue too is we're really numbers driven investors. We're very, very careful about the numbers and the underwriting. And I kind of I made a mistake with Phoenix. I was so interested in getting into the Phoenix market that I let my standards lower for cash on cash returns, and it was just too slim of a margin. So we bought a property in Dallas instead, which made almost 3% more in cash on cash than the property we're looking at in Phoenix.
PhD in mathematics, I would assume you're very numbers oriented.
Hey, you got to use your strengths.
Kim, what is clear height, and why is that so important?
The clear height is just the height from the ground to the top of the warehouse, the shortest point of the top of the warehouse. And it's very important because a lot of these people are distributors and they have to fit their racks and their lifts and everything into the warehouse. So if it's too short, you're going to limit your amount of users. And as I mentioned earlier, one of our favorite things about these properties is its versatility. So that property was really pigeonholing itself to more of an office user, and we try to stick away from people that are going to want too much office.
Yeah, and there's certain milestones with clear height, like 14 foot. You can get an additional rack in there. The forklift can get higher, and then yeah, so that's that 12 to 14 foot difference may not seem like a lot, but it's huge in terms of the potential tenants you can attract.
Yes, and as you know, when you underwrite a deal, there's always going to be errors and things that you discover along the way. And in the Phoenix property, the underwriting was in their favor, so the margins got even slimmer. Whereas in the Dallas property, we underwrote, the margins actually ended up being in our favor. So that's the direction we want to go.
Kim, how do you find tenants for properties like this?
So we really believe in local property management. We've always invested. So I'm originally from, not originally, but we've lived in Los Angeles for 10 years. We moved at the end of 2020 to Arizona. And my investing motto was always ABC, anything but California. So we've always had properties out of state. And we've, since the beginning, believed in local property management. Our very first property manager for that Vancouver property was an older gentleman. And he basically told us, look, I know how to run this. I think of this as my property. And at first we were kind of offended and, thought, oh, he doesn't respect us. But then we realized that that's exactly what we want. Property managers and leasing agents who think of it as their property and treat it as their own. And so we really rely on local leasing agents to help us fill the properties, and they advertise through their websites, CoStar, LoopNet, sometimes Craigslist, the usual channels.
Is it hard to find property managers experienced in flex space or light industrial?
It is. It's pretty challenging. It's a unique space, and there's a lot of big companies in the market that will charge a large fee, and they have these young guys on the job, and nothing wrong with the young guys on the job, but they don't quite get the relationship aspect, and we're looking for the guys who are more seasoned. And when you go around the property and talk to them, everyone knows your property, that guy's name, and sometimes thinks they own it. So in the Texas property we bought last year, we hired the property manager that was already working on the space as the property manager, and everyone knew him, and it was just an obvious choice.
Is finding a qualified property manager part of your due diligence? And would you still close on a building if you didn't have a PM? I can't hear you. Did you just go on mute? Oh, I just lost you. How about now? Try. I don't hear you. I've got no audio from you, either on my speaker or my. I just heard a little buzz.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Is the quality okay?
It sounds like you're in a different room.
What? Hopefully we can X this out.
We'll edit that out.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Do you have a hardwired mic?
Let's see.
I lost you again. I still can't hear you. Still nothing. Don't worry. We'll figure it out. Can you hear me?
Is this any better?
Keep talking.
Can you hear me?
No, like barely.
Can you hear me now?
Like a long distance phone call. I mean, it's bad. It's very muted.
Can you hear me now?
It's the same. Are you on a laptop or a desktop?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you on a laptop or a desktop?
Oh, it's still. Sorry.
Okay, you sound okay now.
Okay, but I just can't hear you very well.
Uh,
Can you talk again?
yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Can we edit all that out?
Yeah, we'll edit that out. You sound like there's still a little bit of an echo.
Shoot.
But
Sorry.
that's okay. I think we can work
try
with
the
it.
headset again?
No, because it was too quiet.
Okay. This one? Okay.
So is this a laptop or a desktop
Yeah,
computer?
it's a laptop.
Can you get a little closer to it just so your audio picks up a little better?
Yeah, let me see.
Or you know what? Just talk a little louder than normal and you'll be fine.
Okay, does this sound okay?
Yeah, that'll
Are
work.
you sure?
Yeah, our editors, I mean, we should be good. If not, we'll re-record it, but I think it sounds good. It sounds good enough to publish.
Okay, do you want me to try this one more time?
No, I
Okay.
think this will work.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I will ask you my last question again, if that's okay. Okay. And okay. So Kim, if you are in due diligence, is finding a property manager part of that process? And if you don't find a qualified PM, would you still close on that property?
Yes, so that's a great question. We have a pretty detailed underwriting process that we go through. And one of the main steps we go through in the due diligence process is to identify a property manager. And that was learned through trial and error of not doing that during the due diligence phase. So we will interview several property managers, and then we will even put a contract in place with the property manager prior to the end of due diligence that says that it will be effective upon closing. And that way, when you're negotiating, you want to negotiate a rate with them prior to closing, because after closing, everyone knows that now you are in need of a property manager. So that's how we handle that situation.
Would you still close if there's no PM?
No, we would not close if we cannot find a good property manager.
Okay, so that's critical. You wouldn't try to self-manage for some period of time?
I don't think so, because we're very detailed in our search for a property manager, and so I don't think that if we can't find one during the due diligence process, I do not think one will appear afterwards. Although I haven't encountered to let you know.
Kim, what would you tell people that are searching for multifamily or different asset classes and always bypass when they see a building like this?
I might not necessarily criticize them for that. I really do believe in focusing on one area and focusing on your area of expertise. And I've learned the hard way that when you don't do that, you sometimes get into trouble. So I would encourage people to kind of pick an asset class and master it. But I would say that if they're getting into it and looking for a new asset class, that for the reasons of the risk diversification and the easier tenants, that it's a really good asset class to consider. And it's very competitive to find right now, though. So,
And I want to go back to finding tenants, because the tenants for this type of space vary, and it could be somebody that has a painting company that they're running out of their garage, or somebody that has an electric company that they're running at a different storefront. How do you solicit this huge variety of tenants?
um, I think it's just, I think the space speaks for them for itself. But one thing we do in our space selection is very important. So we have a list of criteria. One of them is that no more than 20% of the space is built out. So no more than 20% office, because we find that if you have more office than that, it really narrows your tenant pool. You want only 20% office, and then a tenant can add and subtract if they want, but it's a much more versatile option. We only do single level properties, no two-story. That also opens it up. We're careful about the clear height. That's another thing. And the other thing is we look for properties that are on busy roads and have a lot of good street frontage. I always say they face the street the hamburger way instead of the hot dog way, so that there's lots of signage, and so you get that retail crossover. So if you have an industrial building that's in the middle of nowhere, which happens a lot with, there's a lot of Texas properties that are really, far out from town, you're going to really limit your tenant base. And so we look for places that have that retail crossover. So it can be a CrossFit, it can be a driving school. It's close to, a variety of commercial retail properties, so that sometimes we get storage from big retail businesses. And then the last thing is we look for properties where no more than 30% of the space is occupied by a single tenant, so that we have these small units that turn over quickly. And just as an aside, I've kind of learned a rule of thumb that it takes about a month per square foot of space to lease. So 1,000 square foot unit takes me about a month to lease, whereas a 10,000 square foot unit can take 10 months to a year.
And Kim, some of your tenants will have customers coming into their shop. Others will just have vans where employees show up and they leave in the morning, come back at night. What are your parking requirements for customer parking on these properties?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So we do look for ample parking, at least a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 per 1,000, to accommodate that, because we do want that retail crossover. And so we look for enough parking for that retail purpose.
Have you built any of these buildings, or do you just acquire existing properties?
We've just acquired them. Yeah,
What,
and we found that it's not cost effective even to build them right now. And it certainly wouldn't be cost effective for us. Like the people who are building these properties are building it themselves. They are the GC on the property. And otherwise, they're just too expensive to build with the build out.
why is that? It seems like block walls, metal roof. Why is that expensive to build?
I think it's the build out